Sudhi Bangalore is a senior management executive and an industry expert in the field of manufacturing technologies and Industry 4.0. With over 3 decades of global well-rounded experience in innovation and product development, he has helped innovate and commercialize several major technologies that have helped drive major business impact for companies such as GM, Ford, Pillsbury, Colgate, Philips, Corning, Kraft, and others. With a firm belief of being a source of large good for the community, he has served as an expert advisor on several state initiatives to consult and guide digital transformation at scale for Connecticut small medium businesses. As part of the major transformation in the great state of Connecticut, he is also helping with the program design of creating a major advanced manufacturing hub at Parkville. In this regard, he has helped bring sponsorship and support from many large and small corporations such as Rockwell Automation, Fanuc, Microsoft, Cisco, and others. I'd like to introduce Sudhi Bangalore to come up and give your keynote speech.
Good morning. How's everyone? Great. Hey, so it's a pleasure and an honor to talk about an important topic at a very important time. And I want to thank CCAT, specifically Ron, Jackie, Nasir, and a whole crew of other folks that has helped put this event together. And for me to be the keynote speaker and get this important event off the ground, talking about a topic that is extremely relevant and close to my heart. And that topic is impact, right? So impact is so relevant right now because it's really step of the whole transformation journey, if you think about it. Step one is to inspire people to engage with technology. And Ron talked about inspiring the 3 years old to engage on technology through an iPad or something like that. I wish life was as simple as that for small to medium business, especially to engage on technology. It's a lot more expensive, a lot more complex, a whole host of things, right? So, but you got to inspire. And that's what CCAT, Constep, and a whole host of other companies, along with the partners, have helped accomplish, right? What you're seeing there is to inspire, just show the art of the practical, show the art of the possible. And so that's what this center is all about. But then they've done a great job, but now it's time for step two. Okay, now that you're inspired, how do you engage? And how do you engage at scale? In other words, go beyond just doing pilots. So that really is the moment in Connecticut and in the country, literally, which is how do you get people to engage on this important topic so you can get the benefits, not just at a company level, but at a country level. Okay, so that really is the focus of my topic. And I'm going to just spend a few minutes talking about why this topic, for me personally, is important. So before my role at Stanley Black & Decker, I actually founded a group called Smart Manufacturing, which was really to bring manufacturing on the factory floor together with what's happening with the business systems and the technology on business. That's what I did at Wipro. And I was literally employee one, just like I was at Stanley Black & Decker. So when I built that practice up, helping large companies mainly, I learned a lot, right? And then we created Smart Manufacturing Group and serving all those clients that Nasir mentioned in his opening remarks about myself. But then here's what happened. When Industry 4.0 rolled along, there's tons of activity, right? Everyone wanted to know what this is all about and they wanted to play with it. So I realized after about a year and a half or two, I spent 70% of my time and that of my teams, along with a budget, working on pilots. That's all we ever did, was work on pilots. And most of those pilots not paid for, right? Which is okay. But the point is, how long do you continue just working on pilots? So it has been a problem it started about 6-7 years ago with a whole Industry 4.0 journey. Till date, that has been sort of the tone for the most part. So how do you actually fix that, right? So that really is how I'm thinking through, and based on my experience at Wipro, working with all of those large companies, and then at Stanley Black & Decker, working with all the partners, and with large swath of factories that Stanley Black & Decker has, is really what's going to drive my comments today in this presentation. Okay, so with that, I just want to spend a minute or two talking about the audience that it is intended for. The audience really primarily is for the small to medium business owners and the leaders around their ownership. Is how do you actually engage? How do you now bring the benefits of all of the things that I will talk about, what Nasir talked about in his remarks, right? So that really is what it's intended for. That said, I realize there's a lot of other partners and a lot of other people that make these small to medium businesses run. So it's really meant for that. It's really not meant for companies that's already well on their way to the transformation journey. It's not meant for the large companies that have realized the benefits. It's really the ones who are just starting out or not starting, okay? So with that, I'm going to get to slide 1, which is really the topic, which is impact. I said, no, I thought about this. I was actually toying with the idea of using the word value. But then if you think about value, the connotation of value is only money. This goes way beyond money, right? This is impact. It automatically means people. It's a subtle but really, really important distinction. You got to have people. If not, it's just technology and money. And that's where the problem lies, right? So with that, how do you define impact? How do you build impact? And how do you deliver? Just, again, subtle but important distinction between build and deliver and expand. Life never sits still. So that's really are the 4 important dimensions of impact. So with that, I'll talk about what the state of the impact is. And this is a well-traveled slide. This slide came about somewhere about just before COVID. It was done by MAPI, Deloitte, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Essentially, what this chart is telling you is Industry 3.0 literally has delivered twice the impact so far compared to Industry 4.0. Think about that, right? Which is quite stark, despite the way the world is connected now with the media and all the hype that you're seeing. It is a trickle of what Industry 3.0 delivered, right? And the reasons are many. And then the 2 big reasons are participation. Half of the industry is missing in action. It's only a 49% participation, right? And then the ones who are, guess what? They're all playing on the sidelines with pilots over 2+ years. So that really is what's happening, right? And not to talk about the small to medium sector, which is 99.3% of US manufacturing. It's a majority of what US manufacturing is all about. And there's very little attention, in my opinion, and Ron and others, along with Beatrice, will tell you that that's exactly what it is. There's not enough attention paid, right? So that really is what the situation is. And the reasons are many. In my opinion, number 1 is lack of trust. When you invest in all of this technology and money, will it really get the returns, right? That's number 1. Complexity, tons of complexity. If you look at Nasir's drawing, I mean, how would a small to medium business person look at it and say, wow, this is amazing, right? No, it's not. The impact is, but really to think about all the different standards and the different technologies, bringing it together, that's pretty intimidating to say the least, right? And finally, it's development heavy. You got to start from scratch. You got to build something, you start from scratch. There's very little reuse through templates and frameworks and things like that. So that it's an important, spent some time talking about, belabored it, but it's an important topic. So it's I4O, in short, it's yet to deliver on its promise. And then the story gets a little stark as well, continuing on from the slide or the data from 2019. This is a more recent slide that talks about an unprecedented flattening of individual productivity at a worker level, right? It's never happened in decades. If you see the last decade, it started flattening out, right? So it kind of compounds the first topic. But that said, so why are we still working and talking about I4O? The good news is that the chart that you see on the right is very uplifting. This is a McKinsey slide. Again, it's about 2 years old, but what it basically says is all that said, there are certain industries that can still highly benefit from where the macroeconomics are and where the industry segment is to really drive some significant growth. We're talking about a GDP delta of $275 million and up to 1.5 million jobs. So it's still massive. The opportunity is still massive. That's why we are all here, right? Is to see how can we go after that big opportunity. So with that, here is my view of value, right? You got to have, there's several dimensions to it. There's a summary of what the value is. We got to talk about that. And I'll show you an artifact that kind of shows you what the aspects are in that summary statement. Then you have solutions, of course, all the things that Nasir talked about. Again, that's one of them. So it's, what are the use cases? It's also called, instead of solutions, people call them use cases. And by the way, that's another term a lot of the small to medium business people don't understand. What the heck is a use case, right? So it's as simple as that. The terminology becomes really important. Get down to the level where the individuals can understand on the factory floor. Then solutions to value, right? So now that you have it, how do you extract that? And that's where change management becomes really important. You can have the technology working or people using it. The fact of the matter is a lot of companies have a huge problem with that, right? And then the validation playbook, just because the technology is working, you've got to validate that it's really delivering value through your bottom line, through your P&L. If you can't prove that, then it's a story half told, right? And finally, you got to have a support strategy. If you don't have a support strategy, then it's unfortunately not going to work because you can't scale and won't even, allow you to engage on what you've delivered past the 2-3 year mark. So with that, this is an example slide that talks about, how do you create a value catalog? By the way, most of the information that I'll be sharing with you in terms of data, it's public information. If I'm sharing any information from my previous company, Stanley Black & Decker, it's information that we've shared in public events. And so that's what I just wanted to make that caveat. And I've tried to take away companies' names because this is not meant to be a sales event, right? So I really wanted to make sure that the topic is, if there's a technology of interest, that show the technology. And if you folks are interested, I'd be happy to share the names of the company, okay? So with that, long story short, there's a couple of categories there. Productivity, there's several solutions / use cases that you have there. Automation, asset utilization, you can read the rest. End of the day, when you add all that up, this has to be pre-planned before you start engaging on transformation. Then the kind of impact that you should be able to get is with people, is with growth, is with financials, of course, and agility. This helps with agility, right? You need to be able to adapt to changing conditions. If done right, it definitely gives you resilience and agility. So with that, I'm going to switch lanes a little bit. Nasir kind of teased this topic a little bit with talking about Toyota, GE, etc., in terms of what kind of impact that they have driven. So I'm going to take a similar approach and talk about impact as seen by companies that's part of the World Economic Forum. And the reason why they're important is World Economic Forum about 5-6 years ago, 2016, more than that, 6 years ago, Dr. Klaus, the founder of World Economic Forum, decided that manufacturing is going to be a big segment within World Economic Forum. They were never before. But because of the fourth revolution, he said this is such an important seminal moment that it's going to be part of the World Economic Forum Charter. So they created an advanced manufacturing segment, and I'm actually one of the thought leaders there. They call it future leadership. I'm still part of that leadership. And so they created what's called as a lighthouse program, working with McKinsey, right? And you see some of the names there, like Medea, Bosch, and Johnson & Johnson, and on and on. There are 110 companies now that's part of that cohort. And here's the deal. What they basically wanted to show was both the art of the practical and the fact that you can deliver impact at scale. So they put everything they had at the kitchen, right? As they said, at the kitchen sink. That's what they did. They put all kinds of resources and effort into these sites, And it's typically a 3 to 4 year program. But the point is, once that is done, the kind of impacts that they have delivered is staggering, right? So I just picked a few one. This is the latest update. This is about 2-3 months old. And so a synthesis of all of the things that these companies have done. The headings are transformation, growth. There are 2 cost categories and a quality category, right? Essentially what you're seeing there, and I just highlighted a few. For example, in Medea, that actually is a white goods company, right? Which is sort of like Whirlpool and the likes. They basically drove 20% OEE impact, and then they had 75% defect rate foaming that came down, and on, significant numbers, right? And then if you look at the next company, Schneider Electric, they actually reduced lead time by 67%. Amazing, right? So, and then you have Bosch that drove 50% improvement in changeover time from one product to the other. Labor productivity up by 20%. On that note, can you imagine if small to medium businesses can actually drive 7 to 12%, less than fleet average? Can you imagine if 20% of Connecticut companies can help do that? The kind of impact it'll create for the state, incredible. So that's where the focus should be. Now that we've done the technology bit, talking about predictive this, predictive that, let's engage on really deploying this at scale. Okay, it gets me excited about the opportunity. Johnson & Johnson, cost story again. Finally, quality. If you think about it, this company called BOE, they drove 75% reduction in defect rate, 66% in OEE. You get the point, right? But the point and the challenge is, all of these companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars to extract that value and impact. Now, the challenge for us and the opportunities, how can you do it at half the cost for small to medium business? And that's my passion, right? And this is one of the things I got working for Stanley Black & Decker, amazing company, right? One of the things that when I was employee 1, the whole program was not designed just for Stanley Black & Decker. It was actually, as part of that ethos and the purpose statement was, how can you be a force for larger good in the community? That's how long I've been engaging with Ron and the team about 5 years ago, right? So that's what my passion is. So with that, here's another chart that kind of takes some of these solutions, and I want to show you some things now, right? Instead of me talking about it. So here is just a smattering of solutions / use cases that basically gets plotted against what's the effort / cost and the kind of impact. The bottommost is the most important one. Once you connect an asset, you get some data out of it, and then you start visualizing it. You go from a black box to a glass box, essentially. You start seeing what's going on with your process. So that's real-time transparency. And then if you go on up, okay, the same kind of technology, but now if you build a paperless app, sorry, Nasir, I keep picking on your slide because it was appropriate and relevant. So essentially what it is, you get rid of paper and you're focusing on people, right? So you get rid of paper, you engage with people, you automate things. It's a beautiful thing. And that's what paperless is. And the thing about paperless that excites me is it's not this long, drawn out initiative like what a transformation program represents. It's kind of intimidating, right? Big companies can afford that, not the small companies. So if paperless is a great example where you can take the processes that really matter, get rid of paper, bring value right then and there. Okay, and then I won't get into all of the other details, what Nasir talked about, process digital twins, somewhere in the middle, but then at the top of the heap really is scheduling, right? Constraint-based scheduling. Essentially, how do you schedule your asset, knowing what, even though you have constraint, how do you do that? And that's an important technology. That's always been so, but it's getting even more impactful. But guess what? As with any good thing in life, it takes a lot to deploy a true good constraint-based system that works, okay? So that's what that is. But once you do it, it has all kinds of benefit. Your margin goes up because you're utilizing your assets better. Okay, your productivity goes up. Not only that, your inventory comes down, therefore cash flow goes up. Beautiful thing all around, but it's complex. But Luckily, there are technology advances like what you saw this morning. And I'll also show you another company that's done an amazing job working for 7 years, actually helping this get even more simplified. So what I'm going to show you now is some examples of that. Again, the companies don't matter. What as I mentioned before, I can share the name of the companies if there's any interest. But here's an example of visualization. What you're seeing is what's the OE today, what's the availability, and on. What happened, what's the trend, etc. How are your top assets performing, right? And if they're done, if they're not working, how do you actually fix it? Then on the right, the lady that's actually assembling something, that's a very important technology again. Now you're instead of again paper, you're now training people to actually assemble something carefully without many errors. And oh, by the way, while you're doing that, you're also teaching other people. So high potential technology. And this is something, again, I already talked about quite a bit about paperless. What you see on the left is an assembly operation. Essentially, it was a black box. This was an example where they were actually assembling components that went into a big automotive company, tons of churn because it was a manual labor. It's hard to find. So you get new crew coming in and they would get assigned to this assembly process. And then they would keep waiting for an expert to come in and help them because they would run into issues. Essentially, I love what you have in one of the boxes there. They were blind for 9 hours. It's a 9-hour shift. You start something, you hope and pray something comes out, and you hope and pray that the defect rate of that batch is not 70%, right? So we actually tackled that. We actually got a champion to engage, somebody from the crew, not a manager, to go actually build the system. Again, I want to repeat that. The person who led the team was not a project manager. The person who led the team was a passionate person in that crew. And that person was the leader, right? And so that was a wonderful thing. And the next thing, a small company outside of Maryland, and where they had an issue with a die setter. He was the hottest commodity, right? And the die would keep going down. And so people would wait for him. So a very manual process, created a paperless non-value add saved there in that case was 2.5 to 3 hours in a day with one die setter, right? So big impact. And by the way, everything I talk about today, in my opinion, if you cannot get it done in 3 to 4 months, don't talk about it because it's too long. 3 to 4 months, it has to be affordable. Then that's what should help the industry. Another great example, which is how do you now use cameras? And you've seen that in one of the demos today, location and cameras, amazing. Why? Because it's easier to deploy for some applications. All you do is put in a camera, it throws out tons of data, it's 3D if you want, and then you start looking at all kinds of things. For example, are there any spaces in your warehouse that you can use? And how is your, they're doing a testing of an engine, right? So what's the heat index, etc. So there's all kinds of things you can measure, but then it very nicely ties into the rest of the i4 architecture that you saw this morning. This is another amazing thing that video AI does is now you can actually, especially if you have manual aspects of operations, if you have issues, every human does it differently, every crew does it differently. In the plant, if you really look at data, you know what happens? There's only about I would say 60 to 70% of the lines do what you're supposed to be doing in terms of target. The rest are behind. But what saves the day is the 10 or 20% of those lines that overachieving. So they're doing so much better than the fleet average, you make the day. So can you imagine what if you can actually get the laggers up by a few percentage points every hour? That's what this slide shows you. You use video AI to see where the outliers are, what actions of yours, humans or assets can help you. And moving right along, this is the example I was talking about, and Nazir talked about, how do you now take the definition and give a 3D file, and then everything gets automated. That works great if you're making a product, right? A very precision product that goes in aerospace and so on. What if you're making aspirin? What if you're making soup? What if you're assembling something, right? So then in that case, it's not a product, but it's a process. So in that scenario, there's a lot more details that goes into digitizing and defining those operations. So what this is showing you is in a very easy graphical editor mode, you can actually define the process. If you notice, there's aspirin there somewhere. So this is how aspirin gets made, okay? And so now behind those graphical blocks, there's all kinds of data that gets populated. So the complexity is taken away, right? And time and cost. And then once you're done, now you have the same thing, a digital twin of a process that makes aspirin. What Nasir showed you is a digital twin that makes a very precision product. Both have the same components that goes into it. Okay, one is easier in terms of how you actually define and use it. Now, here's the beautiful thing about a digital twin. Not only does it help you take away paper and then automates the process. Now, when the process is not doing right, in other words, it's not optimized, it tells you why it's not optimized, it's running behind schedule. So why is it not optimized? So it helps you troubleshoot, right? And then if it's doing better than normal, suddenly you raise the ante. Okay, suddenly my process is improved overall. So now the laggards, you need to step up. So it's, again, all around a wonderful thing if you can get this digital twin concept right. And finally, top of the heap again is if you're now assembling and you're doing manufacturing stateside, this was one of the, and this by the way, is a article that came out in Industry Week, March 17th this year. And this was one of the big innovations that I and my team worked on is how do you bring back manufacturing to the States? And so essentially this was a long haul innovation, very deliberate. And it was not just Stanley Black & Decker. There's tons of other partners, both big and small, that contributed to this innovation. But all that said and done, what we now have is a system that can actually switch between multiple families of tools that gets assembled in Charlotte, North Carolina. Not only that, it basically is a software switchover. It runs 60% more productive than your normal manual lines. And then because of that, now we can bring back capacity from Mexico and other places, so you have more jobs and more opportunities. It's a wonderful thing. Well, it's a wonderful thing. The good news is it's a wonderful thing, but the bad news is it's expensive as hell, right? It takes a lot of effort. It takes leadership to be deliberate. And that's what happened at SPD, right? Don Allen, who is now the CEO of the company, he was so deliberate when he chose this program. So it took a lot of conviction, right? And so I wish more companies can do that. But the challenge for us again is, how do you bring the cost point down? How do you bring the time to impact down so that small to medium business can engage on that? There are tons of, not tons, significant federal funds. Why don't we use that to do that? So great story. And so here's some quick, how am I doing on time this year? 2 more minutes? Okay. So 2 innovations to talk about. One is, one of the big bears in any of the transformation program is, especially the older the factory, it's very hard to get these old machines to be sensorized and then you to get data. So one of the innovations that I drove was the concept of a data starter kit. What if you, instead of talking PowerPoint and talking theory, why don't you create a portable data starter kit where you essentially plug in all the sensors and it is portable and then it starts pumping in data to a local computer. And then you can connect all of your paperless and other apps and suddenly, lo and behold, you're showing something real as opposed to talking theory, right? Why can't we do that? Simple concept. So this is an example of that. Second, there's another company that I recently came across. It's actually in Europe. What energizes me about this company is look at how they're thinking exactly the same way I talked about. Implementation in 3 to 4 weeks. Assess in less than 1 week, right? There's a lot of effort that's gone into the technology before they can make those bold statements, right? But from what I've heard, what I've been told, they've actually engaged and delivered on that promise. So we need more companies like that to start thinking about time, cost, and the fact that it needs to be, you should be able to touch and feel impact in 3 to 4 months. I actually had a few more slides, but unfortunately I've run out of time. So I just wanted to share this important, I'll just be 2 minutes late. So here's the deal. When you create a program strategy, when you build a program strategy, in my opinion, the important piece is this. Impact should be financial, that's important, but higher than financial focus, people buy-in should take center stage. You got to have people to buy into your idea, right? And then once you do that, suddenly guess what happens? You flip the order, right? You go from people buying to people led. Now they're going to help you lead that program for you. And then you put everything you have towards going after significant scale. So this is a simple pivot in terms of how most programs are run, but this is very critical. So with that, I want to thank you. And I said one last slide. I just want to point out this. Quick people action, traction trumps all action. Super important, right? And then the strategy should be value back and people own. So with that, I want to thank you. Hopefully I didn't bore you. And this was, and it was relevant for all of you. And again, thanks CCAT for inviting me.